be just easy, shouldn't it? But it doesn't seem to work out that way. These old human bodies and being in the real world and caring about people and their problems keep us from being able to rejoice as we should about what we have one day, but we're thankful for those promises. I guess Mark chapter 12, we're going to be in Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44 here in a moment. Mark chapter 12, you know, as you travel around, you'll get to notice that churches kind of have reputations, you know. And again, we're not going to go with the negative reputations churches have. We're going to go with the positive reputation. I think some people say, well, they're a musical church or they're a singing church. I mean, some churches, they just kick back and they just sing and they love to sing and the choir loves to sing and the choir's all smiling, they're all singing. You know, not every church is a singing church, but some churches just seem to be gifted that way. I don't know how many of you remember James Golding. James Golding came here with his wife from the Philippines. He had married her. She was from the Philippines. And they had a baby. And they were here for a while, and they're in Katy, Texas. And Katy, Texas isn't very far from Houston, Texas, and so when I went to the Final Four, the church blessed me with my 50th birthday decades ago, and I got to go to the Final Four. While we were there, we decided to go visit the Goldings, and we went to their church. I mean, everybody in their church played instruments. It was what... use the term, it's not. They were a Bob Jones church. Everybody played instruments. Everybody sang. They were just a singing church. They were just a talented church. They were just a gifted church. Churches have those kind of reputations. Some churches are praying churches. I mean, they get their prayers answered, and sometimes it's the tiniest church that's just known for being a prayer warrior church. Sometimes it's a huge church. You know, Brooklyn Tabernacle, I think it is, or whatever, Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, Symbolic, it's known as a praying church. You know, we wouldn't agree with some of the things, but I mean, there's some amazing stories about how God answers prayer in that church. Then there's the soul winning church. I mean, they're just usually got a strong bus ministry. They're out knocking doors. People are notching their gospel gun, so to speak. I mean, they're excited. They're winning souls to Christ, and they're a soul winning church. And then you have loving churches. I mean, they're hugging and people walk in the door and you're part of the family, and you know, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what kind of church are we? You know, you want to be all these things to some point, but a church, not because of necessarily a program or a plan, it just happens to be what a church is known for, what their reputation is for. When I talk about serving church, I think the Kanisa Laki Baptista La Bila Tamao, the Tamao Church, it's such a serving church. I mean, they take their entire month to do a manhood camp, 3 weeks out of 4 weeks every year, just to minister to boys there at the church, and they do their soccer thing. They're just a serving church. And you say, and people say, I've had people call me, you know, missionaries call me shortly after I got back from Africa and said, what'd you do at Tamao to make that kind of... I said, I didn't do anything, you know. That's what God did. I was there for a moment of time, but God was the one doing all that. But when I think about all those things, if somebody was to back me in a corner and say, what is Bible Baptist Temple? I'd have to say it's a giving church. It's a giving church. Now, my motto out there is life is for service. I like the service part, but I can live with a giving church, a generous church. Many missionaries, many evangelists, many people passing through, many of the the Filipino pastors that come through have been blessed by the generosity of our church. I couldn't begin tonight to tell you the stories of people who've given behind the scenes of things you don't even know about, besides the fact we've never done a stewardship campaign. We've never preached a series on finances, and everything we have has been paid for, and we've not only rebuilt the entire church and added to the entire church and built a camp and everything, all cash, just because people are generous. People are giving. And so tonight, obviously, our spiritual gift we're going to be talking about is the gift of giving. It's in Romans chapter 12, verse 8. The Bible says, or he that exhorteth on exhortation, and he that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. Now, that word simplicity, I thought that's interesting. It says he that giveth, but then he just kind of gives that little thing. If you're going to do it, Paul's writing to the church at Rome, do it with simplicity. Well, what's it mean, simplicity? It means singleness, mental honesty, sincerity. You know, sometimes people will give to get their name on some kind of a plaque. Sometimes people will give to get their name in the news. But this is giving out of a singleness of heart, and we're going to study what it means. The spiritual gift of giving is different than generosity. You know, our church is a generous church. Our church is a giving church. But I think maybe our church has a lot of people with the gift of giving. And generous and giving are two different things, and we'll look at it here in a moment. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 12. I'll not have you stand tonight because we'll be studying along the way in several scriptures. But Mark chapter 12 in verse 41, is a familiar story. It says, and Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which was a farthing. And she called unto him, and he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Now, they say a widow's mite is worth about 1/5 of a cent. Do you remember when you could buy penny candy? Penny candy costs about a nickel to a dime now. I don't think there is such a thing as penny candy. And I remember, boy, you could get 3 pieces for a penny. I mean, I'm going way back, you know. A penny used to buy something, but when you talk about 1/5 of a cent, so if you took a farthing, which two mites made a farthing, so a mite was 1/5 of a cent, but 2 mites or a farthing was 3/8 of a cent. Whew, getting there, huh? It would take a lot of mites to get farthings enough to get to anything of any real value. And she gave more than them all, even the rich. It's interesting. I actually have a widow's mite here that I got when I was in the Holy Land. And somebody said, is that a replica? No. Actually, let me tell you something. If you get something that's 1st century, it costs more than 1/5 of a cent to buy this. I actually have a certificate from the Holy Land of authenticity because this was actually dug up. It was used in the days of Jesus. You know, maybe Jesus touched it. Can I get a bit on this? No. And it's made of brass. And as you read the certificate, some interesting things. It was not minted. It was handmade, so no 2 are ever the same. And I guarantee it was probably a lot bigger than this. 2,000 years has worn away at the brass and the things. But it was interesting that no 2 were the same, and that they've never found a widow's mite or a mite outside of the country of Israel. It was money used only in Israel. They haven't found it anywhere else in the Roman Empire. It was just in the borders of Israel at that time that it was made and used, because it was such a poverty coin that it was never used for international trade or anything like that. Nobody would want to waste their time with it. And also an interesting thing about them is that because of Exodus, I think 20 verse 4, there were never any images posted on them, just trees, because of the book of Exodus forbade putting an image on anything. So they never put an image on a mite because it was made by the Jews and they didn't believe in images. So there's some. So listen, this is mine. Don't you know? I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for it, but I wanted something that was actually from the 1st century. I have that, and I have an oil or a lamp, a small lamp that were actually part of excavations, and I have the certificates of authenticity on that. Somebody said, "Are you into archaeology?" I said, "No, I'm just into the Holy Land, and I just wanted something from the 1st century when the church was there and all that was going on." And so it's a small mite. It wasn't worth much then. It's kind of worth something nostalgically now, but comparatively, there's not much there, just a little piece of brass, barely recognizable. As you look at our story there in Mark, most were prosperity givers. It says in verse 44, for all they did cast in of their abundance. They didn't give what they needed. They gave what they had, they could afford to give left over and still take care of their needs. Wealth is needing what you have, not having what you need. Okay, wealth is needing what you have, not having what you need. What do you mean? If you need $10 and you have $10, guess what? You're wealthy. But if you have $100,000 and you need $100,001, guess what? You're not wealthy in your own mind, in your own thinking. And so wealth is not about how much you have. Wealth is about how much you need. This lady needed these mites to live, and she gave them anyway. Others, out of their excess, out of their prosperity, gave extra money. Many of us can afford to give $100 away, and we're still not going to drag our bank account into being overdrawn and things like that. And so even as Americans now, we could always buy more stuff. You know, every time somebody tells me they bought a riding mower or a boat or drive in with a new car, I'm like, we haven't got all the missions money yet. I hate to think that way, but I'm just, being honest. And so as Americans, man, excess, we live with it. But this lady, we're not even talking about denying yourself some extra toys. She gave out of stuff she needed for food. for what we might think medicine or clothing or things like that. That's what Jesus is pointing out. This widow was not a prosperity giver. She was a poverty giver, verse 44. But she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. And listen, nobody was going to deceive Jesus. He knew the hearts and thoughts of men. So what he's saying about this woman is accurate. She valued the temple offering above her own needs. Wow. That's pretty serious giving. What do we value more than our personal comfort and pleasure? Just so many things will consume our lives and consume our stuff and consume our finances. And this lady was a poverty giver. She had the gift of giving. In 1995, our nation was stunned when the news broke that an elderly woman named Osella McCarty had donated $150,000 to the University of Southern Mississippi for their scholarship fund. Now understand, people have given millions of dollars to University of Southern Mississippi and other universities' scholarship fund. But this 87-year-old woman had been forced to drop out of school in 6th grade to care for her family. For more than 60 years, she made a living washing clothes for hire in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Saving as much as she could from her meager pay, she wanted others to have the opportunity for the education she felt she never was able to receive. So she gave away the money she'd spent a lifetime to save rather than spending it on herself. She gave all that $150,000 to a university. Now, she gave out of her poverty. She did not give out of her. Now, we all think of Bill Gates and, they give billions of dollars away. Listen, if you give $1 billion away and you still have a few $1 billion to take care of yourself, that is not poverty giving. That is prosperity giving. And hey, that's great. Being a philanthropist and caring about the needs of others, that's a great thing. But that's not the kind of giving Jesus was talking about. He was talking about the kind of giving that Osella McCarty did. I mean, that's amazing to spend your whole life putting together $150,000 and then just give it to an education fund because you want somebody else to have an education you don't feel like you had the chance to get. Generosity is not the gift of giving. Those with the gift of giving will give whether they can afford it or not. It's a spiritual gift. It is all about giving, not about what's available to give. It leads into sacrifice. Now I'm going to give you some quick Bible teaching on giving, and then we'll finalize the application to the gift of giving. But there is giving of obedience in the Word of God. And I've told you the story about the wealthy man that was chartered a plane, and he was flying and got blown off course, and the plane went down on a deserted island, and the pilot said, "Oh man, we're lost, they're never going to find us." And the wealthy man said, "Oh no, they'll find us." And the pilot said, "No, you don't understand, they're not going to find us. We've blown off the charts, the course that we filed, the flight plan. There's no way they're going to look here. There's no reason we should be anywhere near here." And he said, "Oh no." The rich man said, "No, they'll find us." He said, the pilot said, "You don't understand, all your money's not going to get them here. They're not going to find us." He said, "No, you don't understand." He said, "I make $50,000 a month and I tithe. My pastor will find me." So obedience, giving to the Lord because He blesses us. The tithe is the Lord's. According to Genesis 14, I'm going to read you the account without getting deep into it, but in Genesis chapter 14, verse 18, after Abraham and his 318 servants have taken back all of the prisoners and things from Sodom and Gomorrah and brought all the stuff back from the 5 kings that come up against them, it says in verse 18, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. And he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him," meaning Abram, "and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand. And he gave him tithes of all." That was 500 years before the law. But notice the phrase there twice, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. "And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from thee a thread, even to a shoe latchet, of that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." And what Abraham was saying is, I gave a tithe to Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. What Abraham was saying is, I recognize who gave me the ability to win the battle, who gave me the ability to get this stuff back and to deliver these people. And so when we give a tithe, it's not about money, it's about honoring God as the Most High God, possessor of everything, and we know He's allowed us to have life and breath and strength to do what we've been able to do. rather than saying it was my education, rather than saying it was my being born in America, all that, we're saying ultimately it's because of God I have what I have, and I want to let people know by my obedience in tithe that God has blessed me. Leviticus 27:20 or 27:30 says, and all the tithe, with the word tenth just means tenth, all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. And so as the Jewish people followed God, all the tithe of their agriculture, 1/10, belonged to God. Leviticus 27:32, and concerning the tithe of the herd or of the flock, even of whatsoever passeth under the rod, the tenth shall be holy unto the Lord. Animal husbandry, anything that was birthed and born, a tenth of that belonged to God. So the tithe is the Lord's. The first tenth belongs to God. Secondly, the firstborn children belong to God. If you study in the history of Israel, a lamb or pigeons for poor people were sacrificed to redeem the firstborn. Jesus was the firstborn son of Joseph and Mary, and they were poor, and so they went and they offered pigeons, not lambs, for Jesus Christ there in the temple. So Numbers 3:13 says, because all the firstborn are mine. Why are all the firstborn his? Because it was the death of the firstborn in Egypt that allowed them to come out and become a nation. And so God said, now all the firstborn are sacred unto me. All the firstborn males. For on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall they be, I am the Lord. So obviously God said you don't have to put all your firstborn boys into ministry, but you have to make a sacrifice because they're hallowed unto me. All firstborn animals were sacrificed to the Lord. Exodus 13:12 and 13. That thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. Firstborn animals. Verse 13, and every firstling of an ass, would be a donkey, thou shalt redeem with a lamb. Now God's not going to take a donkey for a sacrifice, but you can keep your donkey and use him the rest of his life for a beast of burden if you sacrifice a lamb in his place. And if thou wilt not redeem it, if you don't want to give up a lamb for a donkey, you don't want the donkey, then thou shalt break his neck. And all the firstborn of man among the children shalt thou redeem. So we think, oh, the tithe is the Lord's. Well, the first fruits of the land was his, the first fruits of agriculture, first fruits of animal husbandry, firstborn, God wanted the first. The spoils of Jericho belonged to God. In Joshua 6:18 it says, and ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourself accursed when ye take of the accursed thing and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. The word accursed in Hebrew, the Hebrew word was charam, C-H-A-R-A-M. And that word charam means a devoted thing. Therefore it was cursed to everyone else. This was the word that was used 11 times in Joshua 6 and 7 involving Jericho, Achan, and Ai. Remember, they come in. What's the first city in the land that God's going to give them? The first city is Jericho. They march around it once each day for 6 days, 7 times. On the 7th day, blow the trumpet, a wall falls down, God gives them the city, and Achan takes stuff from the city he wasn't supposed to take. They go up to the little city of Ai and they can't defeat it because there's sin in the camp. They find out about the sin. Achan, his whole family is destroyed. That's all paid for. We know that story, but what we don't understand is after Jericho, they were allowed everything in the land because Jericho was the first fruits. What a visual picture of God's desire for the first fruits. God doesn't want the leftovers. God doesn't. I'm just talking about obedience and tithe and honoring God and saying He's the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth. I think it's in Proverbs chapter 3, I think verse 7, somewhere in Proverbs it talks about that we honor Him with the first fruits of our increase. It's not about the money, it's about honor. And He said, if you honor me in the area of finances, I will honor you in the area of finances. And so once that word accursed was translated from the word C-H-E-R-E-M, charam. Not C-H-A-R-A-M, charam. So 11 times in chapter 6 and 7, it was charam, charam, charam. Don't touch the devoted thing. Don't touch the devoted thing. Don't touch the devoted thing. The first city belongs to God. And then here in verse number 18, chapter 6, it says, lest ye make yourselves accursed or doomed by touching that which belonged to God. If they touched that which was devoted to God, that would be doomed. And later they saw that at Ai. And so the tithe is obedience giving. It belongs to the Lord. And people say, well, we're living in the New Testament. Yeah, that's grace giving. That means we give more than a tenth. But that's another message for another time. It doesn't do away with God, wants the first fruits. Then there's giving not that's obedience. There's giving that's opportunity. There was offerings for the tabernacle. Exodus 36:7 says, for the stuff that they had was sufficient for all the work to make it and too much. Listen, when they took up the offering to do the tabernacle, they brought so much that they had to say, whoa, whoa, that's enough. Have never heard those words in a Baptist church. Stop! Got enough! Don't need any more. Now we've done that with cookies and stuff for campus. Whoa, whoa, we got enough cookies, got enough. And that's what happened with the offering. But that's an opportunity. You're not obligated to give to the tabernacle, but if you want to be a part of what's going on. Then there is free will offerings, Deuteronomy 12:6. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and heave offerings of your hands and your vows and your free will offerings and the firstlings of your herd and of your flocks. The firstlings was obedience, but your free will was opportunity. You didn't have to, but you could. So giving is not the same for everybody. There's obedience giving, but then there's opportunity giving. And generous people give opportunity offerings. But I'm telling you, the people with the spiritual gift of giving, give poverty offerings. They actually give away what they can't afford to. Faith promise offering, we're familiar with that. 2 Corinthians 8:7. Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith, utterance, knowledge, and all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also, this divine influence upon your heart, giving funds for the believers in Jerusalem to help them out while they were preaching the gospel. And then the promise of all opportunity giving, not obedience giving. You honor God. He says, you honor me with the first fruits, you honor me with the first fruits of your substance, I'll honor you in that area. But then there's a promise for all opportunity giving in 2 Corinthians 9:6. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, but he that soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. God says, if you're generous with me, I'll be generous with you. This isn't obedience. This isn't, you're disobeying me, and so because you won't honor me, I can't honor you in that area. People have the idea, well, you don't give God the tithe, he's going to make your kid sick and give him the fever and take your money. No, God's not mean and vindictive. God says, if you don't honor me, I can't honor you. But when it comes to opportunity giving, if you are generous and not sparing, I will be generous and not sparing in blessing you. Calvin Coolidge said, no person was ever honored for what he received. Honor has been the reward for what has been given. So the definition, let's get back now. That was just a little theology on giving, because giving, we don't talk about it a lot, but we need to be sure about it and understand it. And so the gift of giving is a distinct ability to cheerfully and generously contribute personal resources to God's work. Now notice, it's cheerful and it's generous. Some people tithe, it's just not cheerful and generous. But the person with the gift of giving, even a generous person will tend to be cheerful about it, but a gift of giving, they literally are cheerful and generous. 2 Corinthians 9:7 says, every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. Now understand, that context of 2 Corinthians 9:7 is not tithing, it's not obedience giving, it's faith promise giving. It's deciding to give above and beyond what you have to. It's opportunity, but if you're going to do it, don't do it grudgingly, don't. And that's why I'm careful. I don't know that you should guilt people into giving and constantly pressure people into giving. I think you should present it, and then people can give or not give, and God will take care of it. And God has blessed so many people because they've just been generous givers. So the purpose of the gift of giving, this giving not because you have excess, but giving because you have the gift you want to give. The purpose is to discover and provide for the physical needs of the body of Christ in such a way that God is glorified, not the giver. Now, some people give, and as long as they're noticed and as long as they give up in front of people, but a true gift of giving, somebody wants to find a need, meet that need, and they really don't care if anybody knows about it. And they actually enjoy that. They're thrilled at being able to do that. This person is not about amounts, but about needs. They are needs driven. See, most of us will look and we'll say, okay, it's faith promise time, and I have this much, and I have this much left over, and I can give this much. But a person who has a gift of giving just says, Lord, how much do you want me to give? And the Lord says, I want you to give this. And you give that and say, and you can look at it and say, well, I don't know if I can afford to do that, but I'll do that. And then God says, and I'll make up the difference. It's just a different mentality. The gift of giving is not based upon the amount that you have to give. It's based on the need, and you want to be a part of it, and you'll let everything else sort itself out because God gave you that gift to be able to do that. So again, you can be a generous giver. You can be an obedient giver. You can be an opportunity giver and still not have the gift of giving. It goes to another level where the need drives you to give and exceed all expectations because of your faith in what God's going to do. They are the primer that encourages others to get involved in giving. Those with a gift of giving kind of get the pot stirred up and get other people excited about giving opportunities. Years ago, a Baptist preacher named George W. Truett, many of you may have heard of his name through the years, he accepted an invitation from a church to preach the dedication sermon for their new building. This was some time ago. He arrived at the church about 10 minutes before the service started and was told that the church needed to raise $6,500 by the next day in order to finish paying for the building. So that tells you it was a long time ago, $6,500 made a big difference in a building back then, and it was a good-sized church. But he was just told 10 minutes before the service, the church officers told him that they were depending on him to raise the money. So I like show up 10 minutes, we need $6,500 and we're depending on you because, Dr. George Truett was known for a powerful preacher and a powerful leader. So Dr. Truett preached the sermon, then said, these men bid me to tell you that you must give $6,500 in cash, which is all due tomorrow. Will you provide it? After Dr. Truett's appeal, began the slowest, most reluctant, most Christ-shaming offering he had ever witnessed. After 30 minutes, they had given just $3,000, not even half of what was needed. Dr. Truett said, what do you expect of me? I am your guest. I do not happen to have the other $3,500. What do you expect of me? At that time, a little woman rose up and addressed her husband, who was down in church, actually the one that was counting and recording the money that was coming in up to that point. And with great passion, she said, Charlie, I have wondered if you would be willing for us to give our little cottage just paid out of debt. We were offered $3,500 in cash for it yesterday. We were told we could get it at the bank anytime in 10 days if we chose to make the trade. Charlie, I have wondered if you would be willing for us to give our little house to Christ that his house might be free. When we remember, Charlie, that Christ gave his life for us, I wonder if we ought to give this little house to him. Charlie responded, now, in front of the whole church, your wife stands up and tells you that. You might want to talk to her when you get home. But he responded in the same spirit. He said, Jeannie, dear, I was thinking of the same thing. We will give the $3,500. Well, when that happened, silence reigned for a minute or two. Then grown men began to sob, and almost in a moment, the other $3,500 was raised because nobody wanted to see Charlie and his wife give up their house that they'd just paid off. Many visitors had come to the special service, not realizing there would be a special offering. And before an invitation was ever given, men and women came down every aisle of the church wanting to be saved. The gratefulness of that one couple for what the Lord had done for them and their desire to give to him prompted others to give and many to get saved that night. You think, well, that's a neat story. Actually, I have a neat story. My wife's shaking her head. She knows where I'm going with this. When we were in college, they were buying the property to build the college on. And if I remember correctly, they had 40 pieces of a pie, and each slice cost $900. Now, you're talking over 40 years ago. That was a chunk of change. And that was just a balloon payment to get the property, and then they would finish paying it off. But it was a pretty big deal. And the church we attended at the time ran about 1,500 people, and there were preachers in from all over the country, and they were starting a Bible college, and they were all excited in, and they came to give money stuff. But, they needed 40 $900 slices, so, they get 100 here, 50 there, 75 there, and they get a slice. And we're just having an offering. They used to do stuff like this. I know we don't see, maybe you do if you've been to camp meeting and some other things. They'll buy a tent. They'll do something just to, in a moment's time. But this kind of stuff used to go on. So they're taking up an offering. And there was a lady in that church, her name was Sister Scary, one of the godliest saints. In fact, she was kind of the den mother for all of the college students when we all went to college. And we all called her Sister Scary. I mean, she was a sister in Christ. And we loved her. And she was older. Again, you have to understand I was, 19 years old. So older was a relative term. She was probably at least 50. No, I mean, she was probably in her 60s. I mean, she lived right up until just a few years ago. Actually, we still hear from her daughter, through some things. She had a daughter that went to school with us, Rhoda. But anyway, Sister Scary was just, we loved her. Everybody in the church knew her. And she's just that godly saint. I mean, just white hair, just a godly person. And that's why they chose her to be kind of the dorm mom. And they're trying to raise some money and it kind of hit a flat spot. They got about halfway there, and the $900 times 20, that's some serious money over 40 years ago. And Sister Scary starts walking up there. And everybody knows Sister Scary is on a fixed income. Her husband's dead, and she's got some kind of a retirement that she gets from him. I don't think she was yet quite old enough for Social Security. And this white-haired, saintly lady walks up there. She takes off her wedding ring of her dead husband. Serious. I'm like 19, 20 years old watching this. And she lays it up there on the altar and tells the preacher, she says, sell that and give it for the thing. One of the church members walks up, takes that ring and says, I'll give you $400, and she gives the ring back to it. That ring sold about 25 times that night. She kept giving the ring, and people kept buying it back until they raised all that money. Nobody was going to let that lady sell her wedding ring. I'll tell you, I've been in some services, but it took me a month to get out of debt. Everybody was in debt that night. We all gave money we didn't have. And I guarantee you, she wasn't playing the game. She meant to give that ring. And that crowd of about 800 to 1,000 people meant for her never to give that ring. Now, you just need to be in one of those services once or twice in your lifetime. It was something to see. Listen, these people with this gift, they love special offerings and special projects. Most people don't love that. But many people do. And I know some people in our church have gift to give because I'm constantly, something will show up, a gift for a certain ministry. I'm like, wow, and I know somebody's got the gift of giving. Who even knew that? I knew it, but I hadn't made it aware. But people with the gift of giving tend to find out things. The Lord tends to help them to figure it out. Cautions about the gift of giving. Giving with the wrong motives. Remember to give with sincerity. You have to be very clear at the beginning why you're giving and to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, right motivations. Controlling others by your gifts. Some people are the big givers in the church, and now they expect the church to run the way they want to run. That's not why you give. You give for God's glory, not to have control over the church. Pride because of your giving. Well, I think I probably give as much as anybody around here. Wrong reasons. God will use your money anyway, but your motives aren't going to get you blessed down the road. Evidence that you may have the gift of giving, you tend to give quietly and or secretly. You take the initiative to find needs and contribute to them. And I score high on the gift of giving and spiritual gift test. My wife drives crazy. I'll squeeze $10 till it bleeds, and I'll give away $100 in a heartbeat. It's a strange thing. You can be a very tight person and still have the gift of giving. Because if it's for somebody else, you don't care. But if it's for yourself, you're like, why would I waste that? In fact, sometimes I think the gift of giving causes you to be careful. That's why you've got money to give. Because if you weren't, you would, your commitments would keep you from having that opportunity to give. And so you have quite, but the initiative to find needs and contribute to them, and you want to find out what's going on, and so that's why if you'll notice, I'll find out. Okay, this church now they're right there, and 20,000 more, they'll finish their building and they'll be ready to have a service. I want to be that guy. I don't want to just give $1,000 when they need 700,000. Although we'll do that at times. I want to be the guy that takes it over the top. I want to be the guy that makes it turn the corner. I want to be the guy that makes an influence, and I want our church to be that church that makes that difference. In fact, just recently, some folks gave some money, and there's a school being built in Liberia. Mike Pelletier, the evangelist, some of you know him, Brian Comfort's son-in-law. He's tied up with that project and stuff. Nobody in our church knows anything about that project, but that project came up, and there was some money given, and they needed $8,000. They'll build a school and run a school and teach Christian education for $8,000. You couldn't touch that in the United States. And so somebody in our church, $1,000 was given towards that. And the kitchen got built there in Kenya eventually. They can feed, they'll have the cooking facilities for 700 people for their ministry there. But they needed another $3,500. and somebody at the church was given special money. $2,000 was given to finish that out. Others have given that. Pretty much most of that cafeteria was built by our church, not anything official we voted on, just people saying, and here, and I'll do that, and money came together, and so forth. And then some other lady from another church gave $1,000, and then there was $500 that just comes in pretty regular for that. And all of a sudden now they have the money to finish that kitchen and feed 700 people. Now they'll feed the students, but they'll also capacity to cook. And those are things, and I like that because whatever's going on here, somebody somewhere is doing something. And listen, when I think about 7 billion people in the world, understand we're not Bill Gates. But you know what? One bus picked me up and I got saved. So I thank God for whoever paid for that gas for that bus in 1972. And so somewhere, someplace, somebody's getting saved. Some building's getting built. We're leaving some tool for nationals to use. That's exciting stuff. And you experience deep joy and satisfaction through giving. You are resourceful and have the ability to make money. I don't know if I have that problem at all. It is easy for you to give large amounts of money. You are more concerned with meeting the need than how much money you actually give. Not about how much you give, it's about did my giving make a difference? Did I move the needle, so to speak? You manage your own money well. Let's face it, if you're going to give it away, if you're going to give out of your necessity, you better be good at managing your necessity or you're going to have a lot less to give. So it's a spiritual gift. Everybody doesn't have to have it. I think our church is a generous church. I think our church is an obedient church. But there are some that have the gift of giving. And that's an exciting thing to have that. I think maybe we have a few more of those than other gifts because it seems like we have an extremely generous church. At times it just blows my mind as a pastor how much money is being given out through our missions program, through special offerings, and through things that most people never hear about. And so that is the spiritual gift of giving. And so it's important to understand the purpose of that spiritual gift. With all the offerings and everything going on, the gift of giving is a distinct ability to cheerfully and generously contribute personal resources to God's work. It's above obedience. It's above opportunity. It is a gift of meeting needs. And many folks have that. And you hear a need, see a need, you meet a need. That's the gift of giving. Let's stand together. Appreciate your faithfulness tonight. I think next week is the gift of mercy. We'll be talking about the gift of mercy, and soon we'll be taking a test. I don't know if I want to announce that because some of you may stay home from school when we take the test, but we're going to use a church service and take a test. You think that somebody praying without a microphone is dead space. Wait till we all take a test online. You can mail in and get your test. I don't know that that'll be a great service to watch online as we're all taking our test. And so we'll play some good upbeat music and take our tests, and then we'll show you how